Oh, the Honourable Member for Nelson.
Thank you, Mr President. Sorry, I was a little bit tardy standing up then. Just gathering my... We don't need too much. Mr President, it's towards the end of a longish day. I have a relatively brief contribution to make, to be frank, because I feel like many other members have covered the various parts of this issue and this bill. But I do want to put my position on the record before we have votes in relation to it. So I appreciate the briefings we were able to receive this morning from the various stakeholders and people who were had an interest in this, and I'd particularly like to acknowledge the position that the member for Mersey is in relation to this bill, and appreciate the comprehensive contribution he made on the bill. To contextualise and explain where he was landing with his vote on the bill, and he's perfectly entitled to representing his community in the way he sees is best. And it is a tricky one. It's a thorny issue, particularly for the member who is in the community that the development, that's the specific focus of this bill, relates to. Put very simply, Mr President, without having to go over the arguments in very much detail whatsoever, I would just say here that for me this bill is about process. I appreciate the fairly comprehensive contribution that the member for Murchison made in relation to this aspect of it. I do think it's about process. I think it is about the fact that we have a planning system, and it is what we have deemed to be the appropriate and accountable process to deal with planning matters. This place is not a planning authority, and I don't think we should be in a position to be that. The matter has been dealt with by the planning authorities that are relevant to it, first the council, then the TPC, and there were further avenues to pursue this matter further through our planning system. Whereas I see this bill as a circumvention of our planning system, and while that planning system may not be perfect, and as members have pointed out, such as the member for Launceston just now, there are certainly no doubt improvements that need to be made to our planning system, and there are things that we are behind on updating and ensuring are functional in our planning system. It's not a reason to start circumventing it willy-nilly, because as soon as we do that, we undermine confidence in it, and we undermine the important democratic principles that it embodies. So let's talk in this place about improving that planning system through updating legislation in a way that's comprehensive and well consulted and expert informed. But let's not start circumventing it in ad hoc fashions for particular projects. That's where we really run into some trouble when it comes to fundamental principles of our democracy. And when I say that, I'm talking about the impact of undue influence, potentially. And unfortunately, I think this has really brought things to mind in that space, and highlighted to us the risks in that space, or at least the perception of risks in that space. Other members have spoken about the fact that we've seen a property developer talking to us in ways that were quite interesting, actually, via a public megaphone of full-page ads in the paper. And that's really throwing your weight around, Mr President. That's what that is. That piece of communication could well have come to us as a piece of correspondence, as we receive from many stakeholders on many issues. And in fact, it was sent to us as a piece of correspondence just the day before. That was sufficient. Putting it in the paper as a full-page ad is throwing your weight around publicly. There's something more than just straightforward communication in that act, Mr President. And I think that's concerning. I would not like to think that people, particularly people with the means to do that, who maybe have a vested interest in an outcome of influencing what goes on here, start to undertake that sort of activity on a regular basis in this state.
It's been happening forever.
It has been happening
2018
forever.
state election.
Absolutely, it has been happening forever, and every time it does happen, it's inappropriate, as far as I'm concerned. It's a concerning aspect in a democracy. There are members of our community who can't afford to put a full-page ad in the paper, Mr President, to make their presence felt or bring their influence to bear, and they communicate with us by email or by correspondence or by having a chat to us in a meeting that they've arranged respectfully through our office. So that's certainly something I would encourage people to do rather than take out full-page ads. Certainly not full-page ads that also go to great lengths to denigrate our Tasmanian Planning Commission. It's very unbecoming, Mr President, to see that occurring too. Very unbecoming. The fact of the matter too is when it comes to throwing your weight around, bringing influence to bear, it does raise other questions around things like political donations. And I know the member for Murchison touched on this point as well, and I'll just mention it here too because it does come to mind for me. I certainly, given that we currently still do not have an appropriately transparent and accountable disclosure regime for political donations, although today we take another step forward towards having that with the passage of a bill in the other place to improve on what we already have, which we will deal with later. We don't have one now. So we can't see what donations were made ahead of this year's March state election. We can't see which candidates or parties received significant donations from, for example, the property developer involved in this instance. There was a question asked during our briefings, and I don't want us to be verballing or providing inaccurate information about the answer that was given there. My understanding of that answer was that there was an indication that political donations were given by that property developer, the proponent in this case, but we didn't get detail about to whom or exactly what quantum they were. So just to be very...
Political party members, he said.
Tasmanian?
I believe I heard them confirm that they provided political donations not to parties but to some candidates.
Yeah, that's right.
Individuals.
Yeah.
But we didn't identify who and we didn't identify how much. So let's be careful there not to be making assumptions about it or putting in inaccurate information. But that's a pretty telling thing just in itself. There are political donations brought to bear. And it certainly highlights to me why, for example, other jurisdictions such as New South Wales ban political donations from particular industries, and property development is one of those industries that are banned. And because there is such a tangible vested interest in policy decisions made by a government of the day for that industry. And putting through bespoke legislation for a particular project is one of those absolute illustrative examples of where that could be inappropriate. So the fact that political donations are made by that proponent, we don't know to who, we don't know whether they were made to candidates from parties who are currently supporting this legislation that has been brought to this place for this particular project. We just don't know. And that should give us all pause in a democracy where actually people with the deepest pockets shouldn't have the most influence on policy outcomes. That's not how it is supposed to work. That's not a clean democracy. So, Mr President, as I said, for me it's a fairly straightforward question here. I absolutely accept that the Devonport community appear to be very much in support of this particular project. The council appears to be in support of it, and the Chamber of Commerce in the area. And that is absolutely fine. That's not what we are here to decide about in this place as far as I'm concerned. What we are here to give consideration to is appropriate decisions about good governance and about strong democracies and about our planning system, which is there and is constructed for a reason, is not perfect, could and should be improved, but if we start working around it for people who have made special requests or have special relationships, then that is incredibly problematic in terms of setting a precedent. Absolutely incredibly problematic. And I wasn't here for other instances in which something similar may have been attempted in this place. I gather from the way these have been described by other members who were here that this isn't entirely analogous to some of those previous matters pointed to. So I actually think this is setting a precedent for this sort of project or development and this sort of bespoke legislation for it. And that is a disturbing one. It's a message that goes out loud and clear that it will be who you know, Mr. President. It may be who you've donated to that allows you to get special consideration to go around a planning scheme. And even if that's not what happened here with this circumstance, the fact that we're putting this through in a way that circumvents our current system provides an opportunity for there to be the perception that that's how it can happen from here on in. And that's just not good enough. So there isn't a way I can support this bill, and that is not to at all question the support that's there in the local community of Devonport for the development to go ahead, and it's not to speak against members who will be voting for the bill, including the member for Mersey. I understand his position, but for me it's a process matter. It's a matter of principles that once we gut them, once we chop them off at the knees, that's it. Yep. The door is open. So I won't be supporting the bill, Mr. President.
Question is the bill be now read the second time.